This is the Technology Advisory Professionals Technology, Innovation, and Growth podcast hosted by Sean Gaines-Harris. This podcast is dedicated to supporting business leaders and entrepreneurs in choosing technology, finding innovation, and achieving growth. Enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to the show. I'm Sean Gaines-Harris, and today's episode is IoT, coming soon to a light bulb near you. We're joined today by two people who are in the forefront of driving technology, specifically IoT, in Alberta. They're part of the new wave of people working to diversify the Alberta economy, and we're happy to have them. Brenda Beckendorf is a great marketing and has had a great marketing and management career here in Alberta, working to evangelize technology and technology companies. She is the executive director of Alberta IoT and making real progress advancing this critical technology.
Hi, Sean.
Hey, Brenda. Lane Hott's career has similarly been in technology, but from a more hands-on approach. He has been part of several successful management groups. He is still a developer at heart, and most importantly, a volunteer and a founding member of Alberta IoT.
Thanks, Sean.
Good morning, the two of you. How are you both today?
Wide awake, ready to go.
Irrespective of the snow in the background, I guess. Yeah. So I want to start today just with a little definition. IoT, or Internet of Things, has been around for a while, but most recently has become a buzz phrase for many businesses. So maybe two of you can kind of explain to help business people understand what IoT is.
I'll take that one first.
Sure.
So I personally think about it first when going back to my university days, but the term has been around for 20 years. The Internet of Things, it came first into, I guess, some awareness 20 years ago, where we were talking about, the growth of the internet and the popularity of, we're going to put a chip in everything. So what about the Internet of Things? And I remember that, going back to those days and around the time of Y2K and 99, 2000, this, fear that, okay, everything is going to be enabled with intelligence and then will, of course, turn on us. But the notion of the Internet of Things didn't really rise in popularity from what I can see. 10 years later, 2010, 2011, Gartner research and their hype cycle notion that it became a bit more publicly knowledgeable in terms of people are discussing what it can do. And then reports started to show this is in the top 3 of potential implications to our global economy in terms of, billions of dollars of impact and innovation, right up there with mobile networks and the internet itself. So that's, I believe, where we started to see the rise, or the innovation, what do they call it, the peak of inflated expectation.
Right.
And that's where it first was published in the Gartner hype cycle and the McKinsey report, and kind of those global technology centers for all these potential ideas of what it could do. And then over the last, the next 10 years of where we are now in 2020, we've seen different aspects of it slide down into, okay, well, what's the actual reality of what we can do with this? But I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of potential implications on a global scale. We're already seeing that in a lot of different industries and applications. And so I think we are moving towards the plateau of productivity in different areas. Some have taken on faster than others.
Right. Brenda, some businesses are struggling to understand why IoT pertains to them. What kind of advice would you offer to them?
I think getting educated and understanding what IoT means to their sector, because IoT covers into all verticals. But coming out and actually I'll use an example. We just did an agriculture event where we had keynote speakers from Olds College and the Protein Supercluster. So we had people from oil and gas and other sectors come in and just try to understand what IoT is doing in ag, but then also trying to figure out what the challenges are and whether or not the solutions that they have today in their market could actually pivot over. And so a lot of it is just getting to understand, what does IoT mean to your business? And it's interesting, I see an awful lot of businesses who are in the tech sector anyways, and then they add IoT, a sensor or a solution, and then they become an IoT company. Right. So I think it's the education is critical. I think that's the biggest part of it right now. And we're really seeing a lot of companies starting to embrace and wanting to understand how that's going to help their company become stronger in the business world right now.
Right. I see that a lot, and you've mentioned a couple of things that I think are important, but I think what a good question to ask is, and I've been thinking about this a bit. The title of this episode is "Coming to a Light Bulb Near You," and is that a fair assessment of the reach of IoT, and how far is the reach of IoT? I mean, is there a bounds to it?
Well, I think the light bulb is a great example. It's definitely one that comes to mind. Everyone can relate to light bulbs, right? They're everywhere. We provide light, especially here in Calgary. The darkness that comes in the wintertime greatly affects our productivity. And coming to a light bulb, when I look around an office building, or when I think about a smart building and the capabilities of smart light bulbs, what does that mean? The ability for us not to think of it just as static thing, but something that can also receive information and be adjusted automatically, not just through the lighting controls, which are pretty static, and the electrical wiring of a building typically didn't have control systems other than the switch on the wall. It's a fairly simple circuit, but a smart light bulb that someone can buy now at your hardware store and put in and then control from a mobile app, like the Philips Hue light bulb, the ability to do things, the capabilities of it might not necessarily determine what the innovation will then bring along. So the fact that it's connected doesn't necessarily lend itself to some amazing thing, but then the innovation comes when someone says, oh, now it's connected in real time. I can do stuff with that. So automatic lighting, energy efficiency in buildings, the potential to not have to rewire a whole building to automatically set lights on and off based on people. The energy savings is a big part of that. And just the light bulbs themselves, being able to add IoT technology, wireless, in something that we already go out and replace in a building anyways, that allows us, it's a good mechanism that a lot of people understand to say, oh, now I'm adding Bluetooth beacons to every light bulb, and that provides another layer of communication at low cost in something that's already, people are used to replacing light bulbs.
Right.
It's a network infrastructure tool that at the same cost can also relay to people how they add it up. But we also have to be aware of, in November last year, they I guess publicized Philips light bulbs and hacking into a network through a Philips light bulb. The important aspect of security, if
right.
Every light bulb is on your network, it's an intrusion point. And so that capability, we've seen already the security aspect of IoT devices, like the distributed denial of service attacks from nanny cams and teddy bear cams last year that took down Twitter, or a couple of years ago. That those types of things and the impacts of rampant expansion have to, we're a species that tends to learn the hard way.
True.
I was also going to say there's a consumer point of view too on this. If you think about, because we're in COVID right now, and we've got things like hotels that are being challenged with all the touch points and that, could we have an app on your phone that lets you into your hotel room instead of using those darn plastic key cards that we all lose anyways? And then because you probably go to the same hotel on a regular basis. I know we travel to the same place for holidays all the time. So then they can start gathering data about what your likes are. So when you tap on and go into your room, it goes, I know you like the temperature in your room to be this level. We know you like this music. We want this in your room. And so you can start actually helping a consumer enjoy their stay there and even give them points to stay at the hotels going forward. And all of that is an IoT in the background, right? So how can we do more things to turn around and embrace and help the consumer out there? And also, because of COVID, turn around and deal with that concern.
Right. And that's actually an interesting road to go down, because my question for you is kind of, Brenda, is kind of in that vein, in that I'm sure you're having many conversations with business leaders about IoT and in their businesses, and what are those conversations? Are those conversations mainly just base level conversations, and do they express concerns or reticence around security, or is it just curiosity at this time?
So we do have a lot of conversations. I think I'm on 8 to 10 Zoom calls a day these days. So there's definitely a lot of conversation where there's the technical aspect, and definitely people trying to understand where IoT is going and how they can work with other companies within the ecosystem so that they are stronger in the market, especially in the Alberta market. The other part of it is still that educational piece, and trying to understand, again, what they need to do to move forward. So there's two different conversations. There's the technical conversation, and then there's the business conversation. And we're trying to be that place where even if we're not the right person to talk to, we can do the introduction to the right person. And so that conversation can go forward. One of the things we've done with most of our meetings now is have breakout sessions after the actual keynote. And what we're doing is putting only 20 or 30 people in a room. And what we're finding is that gives people a chance to actually connect with other people and learn what else is out there. And we're hearing a lot of follow-up calls and meetings that are happening from this, because people recognize that they can't be in silo anymore, especially in IoT and technology.
Right.
So that's been one of our big wins over going through being online only.
Right. So Lane, is it fair to say that the vast majority of IoT right now is in the industrial application space, as far as whatever tank monitors or truck monitors or whatever that is? And if that is correct, how soon do you see that changing into a much more broad? I mean, light bulbs aside, I have my own branded light bulb, but light bulbs aside, how do you see that changing, like fridges, TVs, all that stuff?
I think from both a consumer perspective or an industrial, I would definitely agree. In the research I've seen, the industrial integration and automation has been at the forefront of IoT expansion, simply because the ability to save money, to improve either productivity, security, and the safety aspects are the big ones pushing that in Industry 4.0, or the expansion, the capabilities in manufacturing and factories, industrial remote equipment monitoring, all of those applications, those solutions that are being built based on IoT technology. Those are the things that these competitive companies are looking at and saying, this will save me money, this will improve my worker safety, or this will increase my productivity overall and optimizing. So that's where we see the most solutions, but they're not really thinking of, I think in a lot of ways, they're not really looking at them as IoT solutions. They're just saying this is a new competitive or disrupting advantage, this new tool, it's enabled by IoT, but they're, when we think about, from a consumer perspective in our city, the rollout of electric scooters and ride sharing and autonomous vehicles, we don't really think about those as IoT, but they needed it to be able to roll out a disruptive, innovative solution.
Right, absolutely.
In a manufacturing perspective, IoT across a manufacturing floor to improve the raw throughput and the tracking and the capabilities of either a automated assembly line factory or a warehouse and where things going, that it's more the competitive forces that are saying you have to, or it's either table stakes or it's your competitor is certainly looking at automating. COVID forced us into doing things remotely, and it forced a lot of businesses around the world into how do we manage our things where our people can't get to them, and that has arguably accelerated a lot of those solutions.
Absolutely. As terrible as COVID has been, and as huge of a toll as it is exacted upon on the people, I mean, the technology advancements that have come out of this have been, the growth curve went like this, kind of. It's a hockey stick style growth curve. Excuse me. Brenda, for people who are looking to get into IoT, perhaps is there a company, or are there main places to start outside of Alberta IoT? I mean, obviously, if somebody has questions about IoT, the advice I would give is obviously to talk to you guys as a starting point. But are there any other starting points or pathways to get into this that they might want to check into?
Well, I'm still going to go back to the educational piece. So what we've tried to do with our website is actually put more information on there. So we really believe that one of the key things with Alberta IoT is to get rid of the silo. So there's a lot of partnerships out there that are focused in IoT, AI, and emerging technology. So we've put that information onto our website. We've also, any event that they're doing, different companies are doing, we are also putting their information on our website. And so it gives you an opportunity. We've got an event coming up that's all oil and gas, IoT, AI in oil and gas. So we've got that on our website. We've got one coming up that's on smart cities that we're participating in, but it's not our event. Again, it's on our website. So that way people can get educated. I think that's a big part of it, is to become educated and to talk to the people that are really actually out there doing IoT and AI and emerging technology. Sure. So we're trying to have that information to turn around and start the conversation for people. And as long as they want to go out there and attend events and read articles, it's all there for them. Perfect.
Lane, somewhat of a theoretical, technical question for you. With the emergence of 5G and in the future by whatever 6G mobile or wireless networks, how does that impact IoT?
The biggest things that new technology protocols and the cellular networks that we're talking about, the advances in technology have primarily allowed lower power devices, so lower cost and lower power. The simplification of 4G protocol into 5G, allowing devices to be able to take a simpler, right down to the chip or the cellular communication module on that device. If it doesn't need to use as much power, it can get smaller. It can become cheaper and smaller, and we can put it on more things. And that's been the biggest driver of from the hardware companies building new technology. The 5G standard, support for LTE-M and NB-IoT in Europe and in the US. We're seeing that expansion by the cellular carriers, allowing essentially smaller devices that can run off of a smaller battery and last for years. That really simplifies the rollout of where you can take, the size of a wristwatch or something small that you add it, and it becomes almost embedded into, now the manufacturers think, well, what can we do? Just add it to that thing. Is it a garbage can with a sensor on it? Is it a, around a building? It's not necessarily mobile, but all of those things have to come into consideration of, is this going to move? Is it going to be added on to this thing later, or is it integrated and built in by the manufacturer? And a lot of makers of these things, if they're already electronic in nature and they've got a power source, the ability to communicate but we're also watching a race for different technologies within those protocols to say, okay, who's going to lead the way in terms of which module to stick in, what network, how to connect these networks, cellular, satellite, narrowband, IoT, or low power WAN coverage. So there's still a lot. It's definitely a race in some aspects of which manufacturer makes the most efficient device. But
Right.
all of those things come into consideration. In our business, we focus on connecting remote assets and people, and the device selection guide of taking what's the best device on the market today. Assume it's going to be out there for a number of years, but cost is a huge determinant, and the size, the aspects of what kind of data do you want to capture, but location data, and then what kind of signal strength is needed. Is this going underground? Is this going in a building? How far does it have to transmit the signal? Is it deep under layers of concrete? So the protocol and the signal strength is very important.
Right.
But choosing the right solution, I mean, that's the great part of a lot of competitive companies out there, is there is a ton of options in terms of finding the right solution to what exactly you're trying to transmit or connect to.
Right. Circling back to a comment that was made that you had made earlier, I just wanted to open up to both of you a question. Considering where we are today, and I don't want to get political, but where we are today, and there's a bunch of conversations going on around social media and privacy and whatever you want to call it, fake news or whatever that is. Is there some sort of, is there a perceived or real hit to privacy when we start talking about IoT and its applications?
Absolutely. I mean, that would be my answer. The requirement that we have to consider our private data and the implications on security with any device that can communicate, if it can identify a person, then it is inherently a very private source of data. And then the source of that, the trail of that information, where it goes, is it going up over a cellular signal? Is it going to a hosted cloud platform? Is it just going to a local mobile application? The same focus that we put on our computer security, but there are malicious sources all around the world that are actively seeking access to any network, and that if we're expanding the reach of the network to things all around us, the capability to utilize those things for, whether that's intrusion or just capturing information. But the privacy concerns, and they have been certainly being paid more attention to by manufacturers. The idea that, encryption of information, that hasn't always been done in terms of, transmission from devices to the cloud. And so the focus on what is at least the basic level of secure, and protecting those data packets that come along up to wherever they're being used.
Right.
But it's a challenge because the standards are, evolving. It's an emerging field. Like I said, we will learn the hard way in some cases. The criminal elements, the organized, and this is big money around the world. They are working hard every day to subvert those networks. Right.
So, Brenda, are you having conversations around security and IoT? Are business leaders expressing concerns around security in that, or do they even understand that level?
They definitely do. We actually, our keynote speaker last month was from NCC Group, and that's exactly what they were talking about. The challenge, of course, is, cybersecurity has been a concern for years, and the larger organizations recognize it. It's the small companies that are not aware of how much of the risk that they're at, and certainly IoT adds that extra component to it. But I don't even think it's just IoT. It's just straight across the board. cybersecurity is a huge risk for any business out there, and it needs to be addressed. And you get a choice on how you want to address it, but you definitely need to have that on your radar, that as a business owner, you have risk. And that's just the way it is. Yeah. Right.
Great. I'm going to kind of reach a conclusion here, and then I'll give you a couple of minutes, Brenda. But it seems that in our conversation that IoT is really, it's past that hype curve circle where it's actually really starting to gain traction and take off, which is exciting. I mean, there's a steep learning curve for people looking to get into the IoT, but there's tons of resources out there, Alberta IoT being one of them. I would suggest in this whole conversation that everything now is not Internet of Things, but it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see that everything's going to have some sort of Internet of Things component to it. And if you are looking to do IoT, choosing your IoT solution vendor is critical. And again, a foundation like Alberta IoT can certainly help with that. And not every company that says they do IoT is probably the best company to do your IoT. So I would probably encourage strongly getting involved with a company or questioning a company like Alberta IoT to help you form that strategy. So we have a couple of minutes, Brenda. Why don't you tell me what tell everybody what Alberta IoT is doing and what you expect to see in the next year or so.
So we've had some exciting news. We've been listening to our members, and a lot of our members are obviously based in Alberta, but they're doing business across Canada, North America, all over the world, but they're not known. And one of the things we found was when we started to have these meetings where people could meet other people in the ecosystem, we started to realize how siloed and how the story just wasn't out there. But then as we went through that conversation with our members, we also realized that there was more going on. We started talking to the educational institutions in Alberta and recognized that there's a talent concern. And so as of now, we are announcing the formation of an IoT Center of Excellence, and it falls under Alberta IoT. So that's really exciting for us. We have 8 focus streams. So we have a director that handles each stream, and each of the streams is focused around the story of Alberta and the IoT community. So there's everything from trying to bring in businesses into the Alberta market, the talent piece, telling a new story. We are not very good in Alberta at telling our own story. We have so much success here, and we just don't tell it well. And the partnerships. There's so many people in the ecosystem and so many organizations in the ecosystem, and we all want Alberta to be successful. But again, we weren't working together. So we have come together in a more unified front to turn around and tell the story. So yeah, very exciting. You'll hear a lot coming out through press releases. We are doing a bunch of events. It'll be on our social media. So you can definitely hear all about what we're doing.
Excellent. I'd like to echo that part about we don't tell our story well. No. It took a trip to Japan to find out that Alberta is one of the world leaders in things like AI, IoT, machine learning. Alberta is a very exciting technology environment and only growing. So there's that. Well, it's been a great conversation. Thank you very much for your time today. If anyone wants to get a hold of Alberta IoT or Brenda or Lane, I would be happy to extend that communication, and we'll all learn and progress IoT. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
We hope you've enjoyed the Technology Innovation and Growth Podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or would just like more information, please feel free to reach out to us at podcast@tapintotech.com. If you have any questions for me, Sean Gaines-Harris, my email is sgaines-harris@tapintotech.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and at www.tapintotech.com. Music provided today by www.bensound.com. Thank you for listening.